There was a time when politics and religion were off the table at family events, but this year, more than most, the nation's partisan divide is finding its way into holiday gatherings. To explain why this is happening and what we can do about it, I'm joined by Elizabeth Andersen. She is the CEO of OneJax, an interfaith organization devoted to restoring civility and respect. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Anne.
I'm joined also on the line by Dr. Kimberly Allen, CEO of 90 Forward, a nonprofit working to end racism in Jacksonville. Good morning, Dr. Allen.
Hey, good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for almost being here. We understand you're up against our favorite morning guest, the Main Street Bridge. In just a bit, we're also going to be joined by Nicole Davidson Harshaw. She is a licensed mental health counselor with DuPont Counseling. She's also enjoying the Main Street Bridge this morning. But Elizabeth, I want to start with you. There was a recent poll that found that there are a lot of people thinking about the elections this season. 64% of Americans say that the election is impacting their holiday plans, and almost a quarter of people saying that they may skip Thanksgiving altogether just to avoid, dealing with people on the other side of the partisan divide that are their family members. It's a lot more than we've seen in years past, even though there is this sort of precedent about don't talk politics during the holidays.
I think there used to be that precedent. I think over the years, we've become much more willing to lean into political conversations because that's our squad, that's our group, right? We've moved away from other ways of identifying and polarizing politics has really become an identity for so many people. And so it's hard to come together without that playing such an important role in the conversation.
This is something that, is impacting people. People are starting to think about, but it is, pretty soon that the holidays are coming. And I'm curious. I mean, you say that people's politics have become such a part of an individual's identity. And they seem to think that this is kind of their own making. I'm curious what your feeling is about that. I mean, who ultimately benefits from people being as polarized and as politically minded as they are currently?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure who benefits. I'm not sure that any of us benefit really, unfortunately, when we continue to promote the deep divisions that we've seen in our society and in our community. We used to be able to find shared common ground to recognize that identity is complex and maybe we disagree in some dimensions, but in other places we align. And we've forgotten how to do that. We've forgotten how to suspend judgment in conversations and seek common ground.
Yeah. I think that there's a change. I often reflect on just growing up as a child that you would spend the night, for instance, at a friend's house and you wouldn't know who their parents voted for. You wouldn't
Right.
know their politics. And in my own children's experience, it's almost impossible for them not to know that information. It's not something that I ask them to seek out, but they kind of come equipped with that knowledge because it's so front and center.
Yeah, and I think that that's what I mean. It's hard to hold space, especially safe space. And I've heard a lot about this idea of safe space with folks that maybe you're not sure if they think differently than you do, or if they have a different political perspective than you do. And so it seems like if I don't know who you voted for, then I don't know if you're a safe person. And unfortunately, we've forgotten that we're, believe it or not, 100% humans. That this idea of shared humanity and that there are probably values that we can agree on, it's just been lost.
Yeah. Um, Dr. Kimberly Allen has joined us. I'm glad to say that you're here, and I know that it was a little bit of a rough entry this morning, so
I
thanks
feel
for
like
doing
that's becoming my signature.
it. It's all right. It's not a bad signature to have. 90 Forward has had, some of the most difficult conversations in this community, those around race and identity, and racism. How is this different? The idea of political discussions forming rifts in families.
Honestly, it's not all that different. Because especially in this moment, race is definitely a part of the political conversation, and so where these topics intersect is sure to make for some lively discussion. And what we are really trying to help people to navigate is, we don't want to turn Thanksgiving into a food fight. How can we, sit around the table and have these discussions? As Liz said, it's not so foreign anymore to be having these conversations once you all get together. Especially after being isolated in a pandemic for so long. Now everything is sort of on the table, literally in in terms of what we discuss in our families, and I think it's just we're trying to equip everybody with skills and tools so that they can have the discussion and have it in a way that does not create further divide within their families.
I want to ask you a little bit about identity politics. It's something we hear about a lot lately. And I think there's different ways to look at that. But certainly one of them is that people very much imbue their politics with their own sense of identity. And so if you, for instance, are, an LGBTQ individual, um, that your politics are sometimes, work hand in glove with that identity, and you don't vote separate from it. You kind of internalize that. Not everybody does that, but certainly that's more common than it used to be, and it seems to be part of the reason that when people have political differences, it is so tender because it isn't just about, what's your position on taxation. It's about who you are as a person and whether that identity is being recognized.
Well, I think, quite frankly, I think identity politics has always been a part of it. It's just the default in the mainstream of what identity is that is coming, I think, a little bit to the surface now more because even if you are working class, that is an identity that you carry, and you might be voting because as a working class person, you want to see particular things. Happen as part of the governmental structure. No different than if a person is from the LGBTQ plus community or the Black community or the Hispanic community. There are things that are being decided politically that are going to impact them as their identities intersect with the government and its role to protect, serve, and make sure that we all have the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it's no different. I think we all are bringing our identities into how we decide to vote at the end of the day.
What are you hearing? I mean, anecdotally, I've heard of a lot of people, relatively speaking, say that they're not going to be celebrating their holidays with their family members, that they can't abide their politics for one reason or another. And even if they're not outright canceling, they're talking about it. Um, what are you hearing in your own spaces, in your own lives, as you approach these holidays?
I mean, I'm hearing a lot of the same, right? And I think we are just, no matter who you voted for, you committed all in to that space, right? I mean, I think there are a lot of people that it's just too raw one way or another to bring it all up right now. And so I think that there is, a sort of self-preservation moment of I just need to have peace in my holiday experience, and I don't want to squabble.
Yeah. I want to take a call from Don on the north side. Good morning, Don. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. My question is, we're hearing a lot of people talk about how the Democrats didn't have the right message to get enough voters, and how the Republicans ran a campaign that used emotions and fear mongering. But my point is, why is it that most of the population in the USA cannot see what happened 4 years ago at the Capitol that was attacked, which Republicans 4 years ago called Trump morally and ethically responsible for that, what happened to overthrow democracy in our country? And I'm trying to understand why American people are voting for someone who did that. I mean, to me, it seems like we're losing our values in America. It seems to me a little just, I have no words for it. I'm just trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah. Thanks, Don. I mean, Kimberly, this is the question that comes up a lot. What if it's not just a political difference, but sort of a moral assessment or a judgment that somebody is passing or believes has been passed upon them?
So we are all making judgments every day. I am a firm believer that we are never judgment free. I think, but what we can do in the moment to really sort of wrestle with that is to call those judgments out, like be explicit in what those judgments are. Quite frankly, if you are making some sort of like, because you voted in a particular way, this is what I think. Now, I want to, create the space for us to have dialogue about why or why not, my judgment is correct, and we sort of disentangle that and wrestle in the messiness of that. But I think the best thing we can do is call out the judgments that we have because we all have
What
them.
does that look like? I mean, if I'm saying, "Look, you voted for so and so," I take that as a moral failing on your part. How do I have that conversation in a civil fashion?
You don't say it's a moral failing,
Okay.
because I think one of the things we have to really evaluate the language we use, right? And so, but I can be direct and say, I'm really challenged by the fact that you voted for this person because I believe X, Y, and Z things, and I think that this person aligns with A, B, and C. Are you also aligned with A, B, and C, or is there some middle ground? And can you explain that to me? Can you share that with me? Because I really want to understand.
Are those conversations coming from a place, though, where people really want to understand, or do they just more wanna convey that they think that that other view is not acceptable?
It's probably both.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say that one of the things that we try to promote at OneJax, but I think can be so critically important, is to be curious, right? It's okay. I mean, the caller said, "I don't understand,"
Mhm.
and so in these moments where we have people that, in an ideal world, right? I won't make judgments on everyone's family here, but these are people that you are close to for some reason, right? What better place to start with your curious conversation than to say, "Help me understand why this piece of the puzzle didn't matter to you. What was it that motivated you to vote the way that you voted?" I mean, I think if we can engage with people and listen with curiosity, especially the people that we're already close to, then that'll help us take one step forward together collectively.
We're talking about approaching the holiday season during a very politically riven moment. We're taking your calls and questions. You can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to take a call from Nancy in Atlantic Beach. Good morning, Nancy. Go ahead.
Hi, Ian. I'm thrilled with this discussion here. We're talking this morning. I'm listening this morning about a discussion about the holidays with family. But several weeks ago, you had someone on the program. I heard about 4 minutes of it, and it was a gentleman who wrote a book about judging people before you take the time to get to know them. And I find it relative to what you're talking about today, too, since you may not know everyone at the Thanksgiving table. And if you get a chance, I would love to know more about that program, when it was, so I can look for it. I'm old. I don't look for things easily on the radio and stuff, and the author's name.
Thank you. I'm going to have to rack my brains. He's a behavioral economist that we had on. He's actually going to be at the TEDx show this weekend, but I'm going to have to ask my producers to dig that up because honestly, his name is escaping me at the moment. But yeah, he had a really good Stone. I think his name was Daniel Stone.
Yeah, he was there on Saturday this past
Oh,
weekend.
he was. Okay. So he's already come and gone. But Dan Stone and his book, I'll get the title for you in just a second. Sorry about that, Nancy. My brain is not working on all cylinders this morning. We also have a call from Mark on the South Side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Personally, I'm a conservative, tend to vote Republican, and the friends that I have who maybe see politics the way I do, I can't think of a single one who would say, well, we're not inviting, Aunt Susie and Uncle Jim over for Thanksgiving because they don't see things the way we see politically. I'm curious if you and your guests see one group or another being more apt to say, we're not going to the family Thanksgiving. Is it more conservatives? Is it more liberals? Is it more Republicans, more Democrats that have this opinion or attitude, whatever word you want to stick in there?
It's a good question, and I'll let both of them answer it, although I will say that the recent polling that I was citing said that it was basically almost evenly split, the electorate, that 52% blame Trump-supporting family members for the rift or, the inability to come together, and 48% blame Harris-supporting family members. So, but I'd be interested in your thoughts about that.
I mean, I think whenever you lose, it's hard, right? And so whoever is on the short end of the stick, that's probably pretty challenging, right? And so in this instance, the caller says, well, we're not going to disinvite anybody, but you're also maybe sitting in a place where you're pretty happy with the outcome. And so there's a lot of maybe reasons to be grateful or to celebrate. Whereas on the other side, if folks really gave, morally, intellectually, personally, their time and talent and efforts and lost, that feels like a big injury.
Go Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I know in my family personally, we have a mixture of conservatives, liberals, and everything in between. And one of the things that we have always prioritized is family over everything. And so there is not, in my own personal family, there is not this sort of friction of do we get together, do we not? It's like we are getting together, and this is what we do. And the conversations that are going to come from that, like we welcome and embrace those conversations always. And so, from a personal standpoint, we have always made the priority that we are going to remain family. So.
I want to take a call from Susan in Mandarin. Good morning, Susan. Go ahead.
Yes, for all the reasons that everyone has already said, I'm really hurting about Trump being elected, that people voted for him. And then I take a walk in my neighborhood, and some people are leaving their Trump signs up. And you could say this is a personal flaw of my own, but my peace is disturbed by seeing their Trump signs. And would it be inappropriate for me to ask them to take them down?
Interesting question. Kimberly, I'm curious what you think about that.
I think first and foremost, whatever the HOA rules are what are going to apply there. And I also think people have the right to free speech. We might not like what they have to say, and we might not agree what they have to say, but part of what is beautiful about this country is that we do have that right. And the election results are what the election results are. We can't deny that he won the majority popular vote and electoral college.
But what do you think
So,
about her just because it raises her blood pressure, asking her neighbor, would you take down the sign? Do you think that's appropriate?
sure. I think you should be able to talk to your neighbor about anything. Now, I think you also need to be prepared for what might the conversation ensue after that. And I think the intention for you going in is to satisfy your own peace might actually be disturbing someone else's. So just be ready for the exchange that might happen between you and your neighbor.
And any suggestions about how to approach it in that way?
I always, again, I would say start with your HOA and see if there are rules there first, because I think it's different if it's an objective rule versus my personal feeling.
All right, I want to take a call from our friend and city council member, Ken Amaro. Good morning, Ken. How are you doing?
I'm well, Ann. How are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm glad that you are calling. I'm interested in your perspective as a man of Hispanic descent. You're also a black man. You're a Republican, and I'm curious, kind of how you thread that needle. If you're hearing these same concerns from people that you're spending the holidays with, or your constituents and colleagues about their apprehension about the holidays, given these difficult times.
Not really. The folks that I've been around, I'm not even hearing any conversation of this nature. Personally, I just find it a tragedy that a family would be segmented, divided, fragmented, whatever describe it, over their political point of view. During a period when you're supposed to be celebrating family. A few days ago, I was speaking with some kids at one of the school, and one of the kids at the end of the conversation said, "What is your favorite word?" And it kind of threw me back, and I paused for a moment, and I just said what was on my heart. I said, love. Love is my favorite word, unconditional love, because usually that breaks down barriers. And if you really love your family, why would you not show up for this celebrated event called Thanksgiving, when we express love to each other and forget about your politics? Unfortunately, as one of your guests pointed out, we've reached this chasm, this great divide, coming out of 2020, and now it's been magnified because of the political outcome or politics as a whole, and how we've so emotionally sunk ourselves into this side versus that side, and not being pragmatic about who we are and the fact that we're still, human beings, that we still have an uncle, a father, a mother, sister, a brother. And we've compromised that because of our emotional commitment.
Ken, I want to ask you, though, I mean, there are families that have been broken because of politics for the last several years now, and it isn't just, this holiday season. There are, certain assumptions that we make when dealing with our relatives. Some people feeling that very often we're talking about things like conspiracy theories, perhaps sometimes beliefs that other people don't find reasonable. How would you suggest addressing that if you're talking about sort of a fundamental difference in the way people view what we quote unquote call reality?
I would never profess to be any counselor or anything of that nature, but
Well, you are a mediator, right? You are a mediator. You've worked.
I am. But usually, in the mediation process, what I get to is what will it take to resolve the differences? How do we come to the place where we can agree to disagree, but still be kind and decent and friendly with each other? Except we may disagree on that, and usually when you get to that place, that's not the subject we'll ever have a conversation about, because we have our own positions on it. And I guess that goes back to the lack of civility, the place as to where we are, where we've become so dogmatic. It's my way or the highway kind of mentality, if you will. But I listened to what you were saying about the survey, and it's just it's such a tragedy that that's where we are. And I like Dr. Allen, me personally, the family is so important to me that I would not do anything to cause a divide in the family.
Kimberly, it sounds like Ken approaches it somewhat like your family does, which is, family first, and all of this other stuff is just kind of something we'll work through. Is there any suggestions you have about how to kind of get to that headspace?
Honestly, it's one that has been instilled in me from a kid. And you've heard me, Ann, talk about my upbringing, but my grandmother passed away earlier this year, and she and my grandfather were the people who told us that family is everything. And so the idea for us to come together was a no brainer. She passed away in January of this year, and I would not think of not getting together with my family because of how the political environment turned out. We can have those discussions. We can do hard things. I think we sort of let ourselves off cheaply if we feel like we can't sit down and engage. It doesn't have to be disrespectful. It doesn't have to be heated. It will be charged, I'm sure, because everybody's so passionate. And at the end of the day, I'm sitting across from my mother, my brothers, my aunts and my uncles and my cousins, and those are folks that I have, decades of history with. I would never, at the end of this, still want to walk away and not be in relationship with them. And to Councilman Amero's point, we certainly can. There are things we will agree to disagree on, and I have no problem with saying when I've sort of reached my end. They have no problem with telling me when they've reached their end, and we are still family.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a reality to having to mediate, as Councilman Amero points out, right? That at the end, there is a shared interest in the outcome. There is a reason that we are working through this. And in family, it's because you're family, right? Blood is thicker than water. But as a community, it's because we're neighbors. As a country, it's because we're Americans. And so there is reason for us to sit down and have these hard conversations, to listen with curiosity, to maybe not have judgment, but at least suspend it for a moment so that we can hear each other. We can walk away and disagree, right? We can judge that other person, but let's at least try to figure out how we move forward, because when the trials and tribulations come, and they will, no doubt, right? It always rains again. How do we get through that together? Whether you're family, whether you're neighbors, or whether you're Americans.
And your group, I mean, both of your groups really aim to try to take the local experience, the individual experience, and broadcast that into a larger area and a larger arena, just to sort of help, develop relationships or even sustain democracy. What do you think is happening? I mean, what is your fear, Elizabeth, if people this season say, I'm taking a break, I'm not going to do it, I'm not up to it? Is that fundamentally contrary to sort of the goal of OneJax and the initiatives that you put
Yeah, I
forth?
mean, sure, I can say it's contrary to the goal of OneJax, but I think that as people, as humans, where will we come together and say enough? Like enough of being exploited and divided for somebody's political gain, right? I mean, there is more that we have in common. There is more that we can do together. There is strength even in our diversity that we can harness for the good, and for better. And so we have to decide as individuals, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, that we are not interested in continuing to be so divided.
I want to bring into the conversation now Nicole Davidson Harshaw. She's a licensed mental health counselor with DuPont Counseling. Good morning, Nicole. Thanks for joining us. I want to just ask you, when you're hearing about these sorts of concerns, do you have some boilerplate advice that you give to people in your world, in your counseling?
So, a lot of individuals, good morning, by the way, and thank you for having me on the show.
Sure.
A lot of times, what we're looking at when it comes to mental health, and we see this at DuPont Counseling Group at the LJD Jewish Family and Community Services quite often. As a counselor, we see that a lot of emotions can come about when it comes to living in a very real politically polarized, society, and it can exacerbate those feelings that are sitting dormant, or even the ones that people don't know they have, or as well as the ones they do. This could be irritability, hopelessness, feeling like they can't get enough sleep, so they're walking around and they're fatigued, or they're easily distracted, so not able to concentrate. And in having those experiences, when they're around family gatherings, they very much could be defensive and avoidant, kind of shutting down, as well as just kind of not knowing what to say and how to respond. And so there's that heightened sensitivity, kind of behavior. And all of these things come about because it's such a polarized political situation. And we're just living in those times right now when it comes to those moments.
So people are going into these events possibly with some apprehension. Kimberly, one of the things that your group is putting together is an event that's really specifically targeting kind of Thanksgiving and coping with it. And we know that there's a lot of variables. I mean, people are often drinking. There are families that are not maybe going into it with this whole idea that you yourself espouse. They're fractured families. They have difficult histories. This can just kind of pick away at those difficulties.
Yeah. I always say first and foremost, please take care of yourself. Know yourself, know your limits. That is first and foremost. I never ask anybody to put themselves in a compromising position to have these conversations. You have to be willing and able, from mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of these things, to engage. So if you are not there, like, full stop, don't subject yourself to that. But if you are wanting to still engage in these conversations, and you just need some practice, need some tools and some language and things to help, we are hosting tomorrow at 6 p.m. It's called Gobble, Gobble, Let's Not Squabble. Just to bring a little bit of levity to what is already a very tense time. But it's a way for us to do a little bit of role play. It's our race cards conversation meets our intro to racial discussions, where we will share some language, share some strategies and tactics on how to engage, when to disengage, how to de-escalate, and pick up and pause and resume conversations.
It's interesting that you talk about, there is a point at which maybe this isn't a healthy thing. And I want to just play a clip that's gotten some attention. This is a MSNBC host, Joy Reid, speaking with psychologist Dr. Amanda Calhoun. And I want to talk about it after we listen to it.
If you are an LGBTQ person and you know someone in your family voted essentially against your rights, or you're a woman, knowing that, this man was calling people the B word, J.D. Vance was literally calling Kamala Harris the trash and said, we're going to take out the trash. I know a lot of Black women were incredibly triggered by that. And if you then meet somebody and they voted for the people who called you trash, or if you're Puerto Rican, and someone voted that way, do you recommend, just from a psychological standpoint, being around them? We got the holidays coming up.
So I love that you asked this question because, there is a push, I think just a societal norm that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why, to say, I have a problem with the way that you voted because it went against my very livelihood and I'm not going to be around you this holiday. I need to take some space for me.
So, Elizabeth, I'm curious what your thought is on that. It sounds like both of you, all three of you, kind of have this idea that there's a better, good that we could pursue, and that there also needs to be an understanding that some spaces are not going to be healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think anybody can answer that question for you except for you, right? And I think it's absolutely okay to say, you know what, this just isn't the year. And take all the time you need to take. If you walked out of this election and you are heartbroken or you are angry or you are tired, then please rest. Please rest and recover and do what you need to do to take care of yourself, because we can't do this together unless we do this individually first,
Mm.
right? We can't show up in space, in community, and no man is an island unless we take care of ourselves first.
Nicole, I'm interested in your thought on that as well.
Yeah, I very much would like to weigh in on that, and I appreciate you asking. When it comes down to finding ways to curtail your responses, it's important before you even leave home, to commune and join within that family gathering, to allow yourself to rehearse maybe something that you want to say. Know your trigger points. I know distinctively, as a licensed mental health counselor, it's very relevant to let yourself know when you are activated, when something genuinely bothers you. And so even in that instance, it's okay to say when it's not okay. Physically walking away is just as relevant as mentally walking away. So sometimes having a sense of humor, having rehearsed things that you want to say. More importantly, when you're in a family gathering, oftentimes there's one or two persons that make you feel a little more relatable, a little more comfortable. And so have that one ally, someone that you can call upon in those moments and kind of be able to say, kind of help me out or have a buffer. And two, just know when it's okay to change the subject, redirect the conversation to something else. I would even go so far as having the leaders of the family. You have those family individuals that really aren't the people that are the elders or what have you, that can say, you know what, before we begin the evening, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're here for. It's Thanksgiving, it's a holiday, however we choose to celebrate it. But this is where our focus is. We're going to put all that other stuff outside the door. And today it's about us. It's about being thankful and grateful, and give yourself that measurable honesty from the inside. But we do want families and individuals, any viewers of themselves or anyone that they know that's struggling during this time, to know they can contact us at jacksonvillecounseling.org, and they can allow themselves to get the support they need, be aligned with a counselor from DuPont Counseling Group, and not feel like they have to go it alone, because your feelings are real.
Yeah.
And they are a very true conversation that you're having with yourself. Yeah.
Kimberly, you're nodding quite a bit, and it seems like perhaps you agree with the idea of sort of setting a holiday truce, just establishing that from the outset.
Yeah, I think I call them ground rules or rules of engagement. I think those are really important at the onset. Maybe even before people show up, like, hey, I'm inviting you over, but let me tell you real quick, like a quick little, real quick. We're not going to do X, Y, and Z here. We're not going to argue. We're not throwing food. We're not using profanity. We're not going to have alcohol. Whatever the things are, lay those things out so that folks can decide right up front whether or not this is the space that they want to engage in. And it also signals to the folks who are a little bit on the fence whether or not this is a space they should engage in. Should they come, or should they not? So I think sort of setting those ground rules on the front end are helpful for everybody involved, and it keeps your house from becoming the place where nobody else wants to go. But I also say, like, don't isolate either, because it's really easy to get in your own head and sort of stay there and retreat and become isolated. Um, I always say, and it's up in our office right now, especially in this moment. I put the Patti LaBelle quote: "Somebody loves you, baby." Like there is somebody in this world who cares about you. Find a person to share a meal with because it is about being at least in community with somebody else. So find that person or that group of people who can help be that bridge for you in that moment if it's not your family.
And Elizabeth, just a final thought from you.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, this holiday is about finding space for gratitude and being thankful. And regardless of what happened during a presidential election, there are ways that we can recenter ourselves and our families on gratitude. We'll host our interfaith gratitude service this week. OneJax will over at the temple on Thursday night. And faith leaders and clergy members from across the community, more than 300 people will come together across faith traditions because we can agree on being grateful.
And tomorrow's event, Kimberly, is 6 o'clock.
Yes, 6 p.m. at the Jesse. Gobble, gobble, let's not squabble. You can find that on 904ward.org/events.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Kimberly Allen, Elizabeth Andersen, Nicole Davidson Harshaw, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
holiday.
you very much.